Hello, everyone. And on behalf of Fourth Space, thank you for joining us on Facebook and Zoom today for this international conversation on an exciting new mapping platform developed by Dr. Sebastian Anka, Associate Professor in Geography, Planning and Environment, and led by Concordia's Circus research team, spearheaded by Dr. Patrick Leroux, Associate Dean of Research in the Faculty of Arts and Science, and Professor in both the Department of English and the Département d'études françaises, and of course, our resident expert on all things circus. Today, Patrick is joined by his team and international moderators from Canada, the USA, France, bonjour et bienvenue, England, Mexico, hola y bienvenidos a todas y todos, Brazil, bienvenida, and other countries as they review and share emerging storytelling trends on the new mapping platform. Thank you, all of you, for being here with us today. If you're joining us on Zoom, please do feel free to ask questions in the Q&A option in the function of the webinar that's called Q&A throughout, or you can just raise your hand and you can speak. For those following along on our Facebook page, we do welcome you to comment and share your questions below this video, and we'll make sure to get them to the panelists here. It is my pleasure now to hand it over to Dr. Leroux, who will further introduce the mapping project and today's discussion. Welcome, Patrick.
Thank you, Anna. So welcome, everyone. This is a very strange experience, obviously. Just to see a few faces on the screen. A strange experience that we've grown accustomed to, strangely, over the course of the past few months. So normally, or rather under normal circumstances, we would have been in the fourth space physically, actually participating in a pretty amazing seminar, which you probably can see now, Circus and Invention. We would have had circus artists, engineers, designers working on a research creation seminar on apparatus, performance, vocabulary, and meaning. However, as you know, this was canceled because of the pandemic. And my initial response to this cancellation was essentially shock. I thought, okay, so what do we do now? What does this mean? How can we think and talk about circus from our offices, from our bedrooms, from the vantage point of our computers? And so I started looking at what was happening around the world, and started becoming obsessed with those maps when you see planes going across the world, and then the planes stop and you just see the lines slowly disappear. And I thought, oh, there's something visually fascinating about this, and what would a map of circus circulations look like, especially at this moment, circus circulations as we grapple with this new reality. And this is more or less at the moment where I met Sebastian Anka, a colleague here at Concordia, who specializes he's a professor in geography, but specializes in mapping and storytelling. And so there seemed to be an ideal connection there for us to explore something. And so this idea of the world, modestly, the world circus and stories mapping project emerged from this initial disappointment, emerged from a fascination with what was happening and wasn't happening, especially, and how we would start thinking and discussing the fact that, this world of circus, this world of circus production, this world of circus circulations was at a standpoint. So what better option, what better opportunity to actually start asking people what their circus stories are. So what are they not doing right now? What would they have been doing? On March 13th, for the Canadian context, and a few dates before, I guess, in France, and many months before in China and other Asian countries, when everything stopped, what did this mean? Did we start questioning our craft? Did we start questioning our art? Did we start questioning the future of what was actually possible? And so this mapping project essentially was a way for me to connect, for me to remain connected with the circus community I've been working with and studying for the past 10 years. I'm not on Facebook. I'm one of those beathoks who has refused to be on Facebook. I was on it for 2 weeks in 2005, I think. It was horrible. All these strangers wanted to be my friends, and I was creeped out by it, and little did I know that it was a convention. So I'm not on Facebook, so I'm not part of these ongoing conversations. And I thought Facebook also brings us, sort of directs us in certain ways that I didn't necessarily want to envisage. So how could we actually create and envisage a map that was grassroots led, that was actually fed by individuals in the know from various circus communities, and actually give them a tool that they would ultimately control. And so we had Sebastian will be able to tell us about what the process was and how we came about to create this map. But essentially, it came from this desire to reach out, to connect, to do good for the community, but also to rethink the community, to go into this notion of community of spirits, community of communities, because we talk about the circus community as though it's one homogeneous thing. It's not. As we'll hear today, we have people from Brazil, people who have from China who have worked with Chinese acrobats and this whole notion of Chinese diplomacy or para-diplomacy between China and Canada, from Mexico as well. From France and from Canada. And these different perspectives, I think, are absolutely essential for us to expand our idea of what the circus community is, and especially what it can be. So I'm going to present our various speakers. I think that the camera only comes on if we say something, or unless someone in the background is able to feature them. So I'll start by presenting my colleague Sebastian Anka. Sebastian, if you want to say words so we can see you.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone.
Great. So Sebastian is Associate Professor and Graduate Program Director in the Department of Geography, Planning and Environment at Concordia University. And he's also become, over the past few weeks, the new director of the Center for Oral History and Digital Storytelling, also at Concordia. And he's been my colleague from the start on this project. It was supposed to be this, I think I literally said, oh, it won't be very complicated, Sebastian, but we'll muck about and just see what we can do in maybe 10 hours work. So that was in March, and here we are in July, finally ready, and it's been a lot of work actually. Thank you, and thanks to your team. Also, I'd like to present Luma Barreto. Lua, if you want to say hello.
Oh, hi, hello everybody.
So Lua is a doctoral candidate at the Universidade Estadual de Campinas in Brazil. She's a circus artist, director, and a member of the Circus Research Group at UNICAMP. She's also come to Concordia a number of times to be a part of the seminar, and we're always happy to have her visit in Montreal. And this is a virtual visit, so we are continuing the tradition. But,
yes, and I'm so glad to be here because this year I couldn't be physically at Concordia, and now I have a chance to participate once more. I'm really glad to be here. Thank you.
Glad to have you. Thank you. Also, Tracy Zhang. Tracy, if you want to say a word so the camera comes onto you.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Tracy Zhang.
And Tracy is a MICC Elevate Postdoctoral Fellow at the Mel Oppenheim School of Cinema at Concordia. And I mentioned it a tiny bit before. Tracy has done research on Chinese acrobats, and also this paradiplomacy, which is fascinating, between Chinese acrobats and Canadian acrobats over the years. Basically relationships between China and Canada through Circus. We also have Roy Gomes Cruz. Roy?
Hi, everyone.
So Roy is ubiquitous in the conversation before this was made public. I was remarking on how no matter what circus event happens, no matter where in the world, you're sure to see Roy in a picture in the background. Roy is a PhD candidate in performance studies at Northwestern University in Chicago, but now based in Mexico and in Guadalajara.
That's right.
Thank you. So when not performing or channeling Freddie Mercury, that is, because he's got multiple lives. So Roy works on labor and circus and is the co-creator of the Hablemos de Circo research discussion group in Latin America, which emerged out of this crisis, out of this pandemic as well. I'm sure Roy can talk to us a bit about that in a moment. Anna Vigiland.
Hi, everyone.
Anna is a MA candidate in the INDI program, so the Independent Studies program here at Concordia. She's studying with me and others, and also has a day job as adjointe à la programmation et à la formation continue with AMPIS, the national circus organization in Canada. Anna's been a constant sounding board on this project, and she can talk about this in a moment. And last but not least, Magali Cizorn. Magali.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
Good evening for you. So Magali is an associate professor in the STAP, so Sciences et Techniques des Activités Physiques et Sportives department at the Université de Rouen. And she specializes in the anthropology of corporal practices. She's worked on trapeze artists, on clown, on pretty much everything pertaining to circus, but within the context of a department focusing on physical activity. Magali, welcome.
Thank you.
So thanks everyone for attending, and thank you for your time. Just to remind, I guess, the attendees what this project is about, and I'm seeing numbers fluctuate. People are slowly coming in. This World Circus and Stories Mapping Project is all about basically allowing people to tell their story, getting them to tell their story, getting them to think about what's actually important to them, but also what they feel like sharing with others. What are the stories that we've neglected, forgotten about? What are the stories that we absolutely need to know about? And there are three types of stories that we're basically considering. Stories that have to do with your experience of the circus, so contemporary approaches to the circus. Historical stories. I know there are a number of historians out there who basically have accumulated incredible data, just notes and notes and papers, and well, you can see my office, just countless stories that they haven't yet put in books, that they haven't yet had an opportunity to share. And this is a first step to get those stories out there and get people interested. And the third aspect is basically looking at COVID-related stories. So I started off by putting one, and I just talked to you about this a moment ago. So this is a seminar that would have happened, Circus and Invention, and yet its cancellation basically provoked another project, this project. And already we're seeing some of these other stories emerge. So I don't know if you've had a look at the map, recently, but it's quite interesting. We're seeing both COVID and contemporary stories, not yet historical stories really, but that'll come. Perhaps Sebastien Gacard can sort of walk us through the various processes. How did we create this map? What were some of the challenges? And maybe remind us of the other people who aren't here who worked on it in the background as well.
Right. So thank you for this contextualization of the project, Patrick. So I joined in, I know nothing about Circus, but I'm interested in mapping and mostly in mapping stories. This is where I get involved in this project. So I'm gonna start by sharing the screen. Maybe it's probably more interesting to see the map. You might have seen it, but it allows me to talk a bit about the first the interface and the platform. So what we used here was supposed to be an easy and quick way of getting stories together while people were confined. Well, it took us longer than expected because of ethics, because of translation, because of technical issues. But so we decided to use a software named UMap for a couple of reasons. First, it is simple and quite robust. So it enables to call the data from databases that are located anywhere on the internet. So that makes things easy. We can have a database that we can use for this software. And it's also open source. And we wanted to support this kind of project. And it's also easy to use and to navigate. So you can click on any kind of symbols. We have 3 symbols as mentioned by Patrick. And then on the side, you have access to the story. So this is an easy way to go. And then there's another very basic function that you can both data based on names that appear in the title. So you can look for things about Circus. You can turn on and off data. So it gives quite a bit of space for text. And it's easy to use and it's easy to navigate and it can be built collaboratively. So those were the main reason why we decided to go with this platform. It's also interesting to see that it's a very visual tool because we use the map as a way to bring those stories together, but it's also mostly a navigational platform to navigate between those stories. So we're not gonna do like spatial analysis or anything like that. It's really to bring those stories together into the same environment and to be able to access them. Then to have your own story added, we designed these forms. So I'm gonna do the French one. So you click on the form, we have a Chinese version, we have a Brazilian Portuguese version, a Spanish version, English version, French version at the moment. So you have an introduction, you go on next, we have the agreement, so the ethics, like that you know the condition of using it. You can accept, after reading them, of course, you can decide what kind of anonymity you want to have, and then you need to enter your email address to be able to go on. Like that you get the agreement back and we know that there's a real person entering the story. So you can go next, you can add a few things, who you are, where you are, the type of story you want to say, but you want to describe. Patrick mentioned that before. Be recent, the title of the story, and then you need to say where this story takes place. So there's a map. We use for this form a software named ArcGIS, actually it's Survey 123. So it's really a software that's been designed for representing spatial data, making maps, making spatial analysis. So therefore they have this nice feature embedded in the map that enable people to identify places and to locate their story somewhere. And then after that, you can say when the story unfolds, and then you can tell us what's your story. So I have a little part of the story that I already enter here. You can have it ready. I copy it, I paste it here. And you can add a link if you want to an image or a video. At the moment, we don't show those information on the map. Again, we wanted it to be as simple and as robust as possible. Therefore, we focused on text. But if we have time, if we see that there's an interest we have this information that we can use a different tool or even the same tool to represent more visual information. You can add the legend, you can add a website, you can say who you are, and then you can add a comment or no comment if you want, and then you submit your form. So what happens when I submit the form, you receive this message, but also the form is going through a slightly complex process. So the data is stored in this software, and then you get an email with all your answer. Like that, you have a record of what you've been submitting, and then we'll send your record to I'm losing my word here, moderator that will go through the story and that will check if it's relevant for the website. And as soon as it's checked and deemed relevant, then we will make it appear on the map. So there's a bit of work in the back end that I'm not sure I need to go into the details, but this is pretty much the route that your story will take to finally appear and being accessible to the map.
Thank you, Sebastian, and thanks for having been such an excellent resource in thinking through how these systems work. There's also two other people who are involved who are not on the webinar today. Jose Alavarez, who's a student of Sebastian's, and Alison Bowie, who's one of my PhD students, and they've been working crazily the past few days. I'm learning all sorts of technical language. At first I thought it was swear words, but no, they were technical terms, web hooks and this and that. And, having multiple languages has complexified the entire process. I felt that it was absolutely essential because circus history, current circus storytelling and circus history has been mostly French or English. And in today's world, everything basically, and we're doing it now, goes through a sort of Anglo-American framework, and we speak English. So this is an opportunity for at least 5 other languages for now to be read, heard. And a fefew people have written asking me, so can I write in German, for instance? Can I write in Italian? Well, so far, yes, for those languages, because we have friends and colleagues who can act as moderators, and Anna can tell us in a moment what we mean by moderators. Obviously, it might be a challenge for certain languages where we don't have those connections, but we're absolutely open to receiving anything that we can our team can read and vet, and that could contribute to a global understanding of the multiplicities and nuances of circus histories. I know Sebastian wanted to add something in terms of the
thank you so much for reminding me all the work that's been done by Jose Alavarez in the mapping side of the project. He's the one who implemented the map, and for Alison Bowie, who is the one who really implemented all the work from the story to move from one software to the rest of all of us. So yeah, thanks to both of us. Oh, them, sorry.
And sorry, Jose, I think I mispronounced your name. Thank you, Sebastian. Anna Vigilan. So Anna's been not working on the technical aspect, but has been a constant interlocutor for all matters pertaining to basically engaging with the community in the widest sense possible. Anna, do you want to talk a bit about your involvement?
Sure. I think Patrick and Sebastian already explained the idea behind the story really well. I think what's really interesting is it's interactive. It carries, it's designed to carry a multitude of voices, a multitude of languages. It's going to keep growing. It really looks at stories in a broad sense, as Patrick mentioned, historical stories, contemporary stories. Right now, of course, COVID-based stories, but it really, I think if, of course, circus-based stories can be conceived in infinite number of ways. And I think the idea is to see what people consider a circus story and to put it out there. So I encourage all of you to any kind of story to submit it, and if you're not sure if it qualifies as a story, to submit it anyway. Just to again, the idea is to publish the stories in the original words and the original languages as much as possible. So pretty much all the stories are just getting transferred onto the map. But they do go through a moderation process. It's pretty self-explanatory, but there's a group of international multilingual moderators that just assure that it actually does pertain to circus, that there's no hateful language, it's not promoting sales, it's not a fraudulent link. I think that's just about it. It doesn't promote a political party, etc. But as long as it doesn't fall under those criteria, it probably meets the criteria for a circus story, and we're really curious to hear really a broad range of stories. I know that right now there's a lot of really exciting creative response with everything going on. There's also a lot of anxiety and anguish, and I think that also has its place to be relayed. And then beyond COVID, of course, there's a lot of stories that we can't wait to read.
Thanks, Anna. And so some of the interesting stories we're receiving so far sometimes are completely unexpected, coming from people we know, but unexpected stories, and also people we don't know who aren't part of the sort of international circuit, and they're just coming up with some absolutely fascinating stories. There are also a few rants, so we've refused those, so please don't send rants. And audition videos, please don't send audition of yourself or of your kids. So, we've received some of those as well. Anna?
Yeah, I just forgot to add the obvious too, that of course it's a map, so it encourages stories relating to place. And it's exciting to collaborate with geography specialists and to have a visual component. And I'm excited, I think the whole team is excited to see how that idea of place and visualizing place is gonna affect the kind of stories that appear and the way they're perceived.
Thank you. So I'd like to invite Luma Barreto from Brazil to tell us a bit about her involvement with this, and also what you hope from this mapping project in terms of your community, but also in terms of your community's engagement with the world of circus.
Well, Brazil is a really large country. And even for me, being in Guyana, it's right in the middle of the country. It's difficult to reach the entire country. So I'm so glad that I'm seeing many histories out of the what we call Rio-São Paulo axis. I think it's really important. So that's one thing I hope we can bring at this map. Many non-centered histories. So I'm seeing right now a lot of COVID histories from Brazil. So I was hoping for that because it's hurting Brazil so hard, and our public policy is not very helpful. So I was expecting this, but I'm expecting also see different stories, because I'm sure we have it in Brazil. We have a lot of historic stories. So I hope to see them at this map.
Thank you. And Lua, I've noticed a number of contributions coming from Brazil that were interesting in the sense that they started off in English, and then there was a Brazilian Portuguese version within the same story. So was there consultation on this? Did you talk to colleagues and say, okay, we want to make sure that our stories are read by the rest of the world as well? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I guess part of this it's on me, because I'm telling people who ask me to, I'm encouraging them to write in English, because a lot of different countries don't speak Portuguese, so it's a way to, oh, there are people saying there's a lot of things in Brazil. And I think it's important the rest of the world understand what we are saying. It's I would like to thank you for this opportunity to have it in Portuguese at the site, to have the agreement in Portuguese, because it's not very common, you know that. And I think it's an opportunity to show the rest of the world everything what is happening in Brazil. So everybody who asks me, I say, yeah, if you can write in English, do it. Because it's important to have it in Portuguese. I think we have to put the Portuguese out there, but I think it's important to the rest of the world to understand that.
Right, and there's, well, as you know, you're part of it, there's a thriving circus production scene, hundreds of companies in a country of close to 300 million people. We tend to forget that, but also a thriving academic scene, especially out of Campinas, at Unicamp, but also in Sao Paulo, in other cities as well. When I first went down to Brazil and started engaging with Marco Bortoleto, for instance, I was just absolutely stunned with the research activity happening there. I was extremely disappointed that we couldn't read it until I realized that, you know, the Google Translate can help us a bit, but it's a bit more complicated for those 300-page dissertations. But for articles, it's great. So yes, please encourage everyone to submit stories, and we'll be happy to read them.
Oh yeah, I will keep doing that. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think it's important. We have been talking about it with Bortoleto, because we have a lot of production in Brazil, and it's the rest of the world cannot understand that. There's not very much people who talk Portuguese in Canada, I guess. So yeah, I will keep doing that for sure.
Excellent. And thank you, Lua is our Portuguese moderator. So any story that comes in and that's written in Portuguese basically comes to me and Lua. And you know, obviously I defer to her judgment on this, but thank you for doing this.
Thank you for this opportunity to put so many beautiful things from Brazil at this map.
Great. All right. Thanks, Lua. Our next collaborator is Roy Gomes Cruz. So Roy, as I mentioned, basically is in Mexico, but everywhere around the world as well. And at the heart of the Hablemos de Circo initiative. And so Roy, do you want to talk to us a bit about how this mapping and or rather Circus and Stories mapping project can help the Latin American circus community at large?
Yeah, for sure. First, thank you for the invitation. I think this project is potentially very good for the community and for the different communities of circus, you know, like the producers and artists, but also academic research. And for the past months, I think since I moved back to Mexico, I've been learning a lot about circus. 3 years ago, I moved from Chicago to Guadalajara. But these past 4 months has been like really intense. I think I've been more busy these past 4 months than the 2 years before in terms of the discussions and conversation that we have been having, because we launched this Hablemos de Circo project early, I think it was February. We have been doing talks with Latin American circus researchers, artists, and the community at large about topics like professionalism, gender, learning, pedagogy. And honestly, it's hard to talk about things and to guide the conversation and to moderate and to realize there are certain threats that we need to follow. So I feel like there's not a super well correlation between the richness and the great diversity that we have been finding in Circus, in Mexico and in Latin America, and the stories and the way that people can share and make this visible and accessible to the world, right? And even to each other. I feel like particularly in Mexico, the communities are connecting much more intensely these past months. So the connections are there, but not everybody can access to their videos about shows, to their production, academic production. So this could be like a really good site for people to begin sharing what is it that Circus is about. And I like the liveness of this because I feel like the project is not taking Circus for granted. It could emerge in your room, right? Like Circus could be your training room at this pandemic situation, or it could be part of the show, a reflection about poetics, about Circus. So I would love to see what kind of Circus emerges throughout these stories and discourse.
Thank you, Roy. And do you feel that this is the proper venue? Because the Hablemos de Circos are basically conversations. So you hear voices, you see people. What about the mapping? Because it's a different medium, right?
Yeah.
So it's read, it's visual. It requires a certain responsibility because often we'll say things and maybe say it a bit lightly, but when you actually write something down and sign this this form saying yes, I'm serious about this and I'm really me, and it's like a different gesture. It's a different engagement. Do you feel that this can be useful and will be actually used by the circus community?
I feel like we need to encourage each other to write and to contribute to this, and especially within the networks that have been created. So, for example, in Hablemos de Circo could be a great place to to talk about it and do it in a way that is comfortable to us as a group. But also we have the liberty of doing it as an individual. But I feel like it's not only useful, but it's necessary. We need to to be in charge of our own stories, right? And if we are wrong and we are mistaken, let's just keep the conversation going, right? And it's right there. But it doesn't, we need not to erase Circus, but maybe we need to discuss and negotiate the stories and the history behind it, right? And also, I feel like it's very necessary that people from classical circus, people with long traditions, jump in the boat, and not only contemporary circus artists or communities contribute to this project, but at large, the whole vibrancy of circus is well represented.
Well, you've touched on something quite important, because the working group, for instance, in Montreal, the working group on circus research has focused exclusively on contemporary circus, contemporary forms of circus, and yet traditional forms continue to exist in parallel with contemporary circus, and we see this. We actually see a thriving, more traditional industry throughout Latin America, and in Asia as well, generally, but in China specifically. So I'm glad that you mentioned this, because we're actually not just interested in the contemporary, but we're also interested in the historical, but also the contemporary forms of traditional circus. So,
exactly.
so thanks for mentioning this, Roy.
Yeah.
I think this is absolutely essential.
Yeah, and for example, in pedagogy, people from classical circus with long tradition, they have a major role sometimes in schools and communities. So it's not only the industry that needs to talk about circus, but these key figures that their knowledge, their expertise needs to be, shared somehow or be written in some kind of form.
Okay, thank you. Tracy, would you like to tell us what you're hoping to see emerge in terms of the Chinese contribution to this mapping initiative, and what stories do we need to hear? What don't we know? Everything, I'm sure.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say thank you to everybody who on the panel and the organizers, as well as the people in the audience. And I would like to first talk about why I decided to participate in this project as a Chinese language moderator. Really, since the beginning of the pandemic, I was really struck by the fact Wuhan, the city of Wuhan in China has been seen as the birthplace of COVID-19. And I actually did a research on Wuhan acrobatics troupe, and I did interviews in Wuhan, and I actually also wrote a book chapter. It's on the review about how this acrobatic troupe traveled all over the world to introduce Chinese acrobatics to different diverse audiences. So, and also since the pandemic, I feel Asian bodies has been labeled as the carrier of virus. And a lot of Asian communities have been attacked because discrimination, because racism. So I found it's especially important to have stories of diverse bodies, not just, we see the beautiful bodies, but also sick, ill bodies, bodies with disabilities. And I think a circus is a very rich interdisciplinary art, performing art, and it shows the potential, the resilience of diverse bodies. Doesn't matter your white skin, your brown skin, you're Asian, you're black, you're brown, or you have ability, you don't have abilities, you're fat, you're thin. And we have seen there's so many kinds of circuses. And that's why I want to participate in this project, is to hope these stories can actually help us to build a global solidarity, not only within the circus world, also beyond it, and see how we can connect and work out of, go through this crisis, this health economic crisis, and how we can come together, see you're not alone, and you are sharing so much sufferings, as well as a new source of inspirations and new ways to connecting, to collaborating with others. So I would say that's why I, despite I have a lot of responsibilities as a working mom, I'm still willing to participate and contribute to this project. And the stories, I think Leroy has touched upon the importance to connect histories with the present. And I totally agree how perhaps we are focusing on what's going now in the world, how art is coping with COVID-19, loss of jobs, and all kinds of physical, mental stress. However, remember, this probably is not the first time the circus industry was in a lockdown situation. And I give you an example in China, during the Chinese Cultural Revolution, for almost 3-4 years, the entire circus sector was frozen, and artists were forced to work in the factories, on the farms, and they couldn't perform at all. All the theaters were shut down. So how this generation of artists cope with physiological constraints? How do they cope with economic scarcity? How did they cope with political repression? And these are relevant to what we are facing now. in this pandemic situation, you know, across the continents all over the world, from Brazil to China to Russia, you know, I think that is the relevance. That's how history is connected to what we are doing now. So I'm really interested in contemporary stories, but also encourage artists to take this opportunity to do some oral history interviews with your retired circus teachers, someone you know, and have a conversation with them, and to learn from their experiences, and to see how these people deal with it, you know, deal with these all kinds of challenges, and learn from them, and record these conversations and share with a global audience. So I think that's, for me, it's a very valuable a way to collecting these stories. Another aspect another issue I like to actually discuss with all the panelists is we seems all still focus on the textual aspects of stories, the narratives, you know. I understand a lot of you come from theater backgrounds or English, French literature. However, we should remember and never forget, circus is embodied knowledge, skills. It's very visual and has a sound, has this such sensational effect on the audience. So actually, I would encourage people to send the pictures or videos, you know, and have some description of what I meant, but let the audience to interpret, to understand what the story is. So that actually I would not only welcome stories written as a text, but also stories animated through different creative ways, and so that's I hope to see more from our participants.
Thank you, Tracy, for this call and entreaty to diverse perspectives on storytelling, diverse bodies, diverse discourses on the circus. This is great. This is a reminder of the great potential of this project. And I'm really struck by what you're saying about the parallels with the Cultural Revolution in China in the 70s. I can't wait to read your story on that, because these are things that we like absolutely we need to find out, and we don't necessarily know about these parallel instances where circus stopped and shut down different historical moments throughout the world. Thanks. We'll conclude our tour de table with our colleague Magali Cizorn at the Université de Rouen, where it is late this evening, very late, I guess, yeah, 18 p.m. Thanks for your patience, and perhaps you could tell us what your viewpoint is on this project and how you feel it can benefit the French circus scene and the French research scene on circus as well.
Yeah. So I'm not a literature researcher, I'm a sociologist, but I analyze the stories that the social actors make of their practices for a long time. So I'm very interested in the question of subjectivity, in the construction of reality. And I'm particularly interested in collecting and reading these stories to understand our relationship to the circus connected to its places, including unconventional places. The imaginary mobilized, but also the objects, the places, the sounds, the noises, the atmospheres, all of it offers catches, attachments with the circus that it will be interesting to analyze. How do we tell the circus and tell ourselves through these stories? What cultural specificities can be identified? What effects of over-visibility or invisibility are identified and should eventually be corrected? The narratives and imaginary are based on places. So far, few stories have been posted online actually. In France, a newspaper article concerns traditional circus in a village in the south of France. It's very interesting, but because it isn't the stories that researchers put on light generally in France, a lot of researchers are interested in contemporary circus. So I was interested in read this newspaper particularly. I will participate in this collect as a moderator, but also with the text, and start to think a story, and I can read it if you want now. I choose the Cirque Théâtre d'Elbeuf in France, in Normandy. It's my first place of investigation. Of course, as a child, I have seen circus shows, but I didn't really have good memories of it. It was only at university that I rediscovered the circus through practice, but especially on the occasion of my first work of research. For my master's degree, I decided to work about women in the circus, and the first space I visited to meet artists was the Cirque Théâtre d'Elbeuf. It was closed to the public, but welcomed artists in creative residency. It was built during the 19th century, and when I met this circus, it was a very romantic place with old purple cinema armchairs. And a few years later, important works were launched to rehabilitate the circus and turn it into a space dedicated to contemporary circus. And just before the containment with the COVID on March, I saw a show during a festival. It was the show Aqua Alta by Adrien Mondeau et Claire Barden. I saw the show with my family. After the show, we could see the company digital immersion exhibition. The disinfectants were at our disposal, and the professionals of the circus, le Cirque Théâtre, were worried. It was the last show I see before the containment. For me, the Cirque Théâtre is a great place to observe our relationship to entertainment and shows and their transformations, starting from a place to think about our own relationships to the circus is the whole point of this work that combines mapping and storytelling. During the containment, all the circus places were deserted. How and where did circus performers practice? How did they still work together? What collaborations have been stopped or created? I have in mind some examples. A circus artist who lived this period in the forest near Rouen and in a yacht, and I tried to tell her to put a story in this project, but many possibilities are open today, and I'm very interested to contribute with you to this project.
Thank you, Magali, and thanks for that that story on your last circus experience at the Cirque Théâtre Elbeuf. One of the last cirque en dur, as we say in French, so physically built circus venue, and quite. I find it interesting that it was also Mondeau and Barden who have dematerialized the circus to a certain extent. Mondeau was a juggler and gradually move towards digital art forms. So the opposite, I guess it's not quite the opposite, but it's a disembodied ment of the circus, which is fundamentally embodied, as Tracy mentioned earlier. Maybe to circle back to this notion of the possibilities of visuals, of photos, of hyperlinks, videos, etc. This is something that Sebastian, Alison, and Jose managed to integrate into our map, and I'm very happy about that. I know there was a lot of work in the background to make this happen. And yes, absolutely. If you can give us hyperlinks, if you could just find ways to contribute to the words with some visuals, that would be much appreciated. Sebastian wants to add something on that topic.
Yeah, we are ready to collect them, but we're not ready to display them yet. So just to be clear, they are not ready to be displayed in the current version of the platform. But if we decide this is a priority, then we could focus on that for sure. And of course, this could be a priority. The question is like the requirement to make that happen.
Right, and the 3D version is out of question, right?
It's completely out of question. Yes.
Thank you. So we have 4 minutes left before the official end. If there are any questions from our attendees, now would be the time. I've been looking at the chat and I've seen a great number of exclamations of joy that were mentioning various countries and various circus communities. So this is quite exciting. I'm just sharing with you the screen also of Circus Stories Mapping Project. So if you want to go have a look, I strongly encourage you to contribute, to share, to tell your friends, colleagues about this project. It'll only be as interesting as you make it, basically. It's one of those projects where you have an idea and you just really hope it works. Well, this is one of these. So it's grassroots based. Sebastian would like to add something.
What I mean, if there's no other comments, I just want to add something about the life of the map and maybe the political aspect of it, because it's like everything else, the map has a life. At the moment, it's young and there's a lot of energy and it's just growing and we're all excited about it, and it will get more content. But it's just one phase in the map making. The map per se is just one moment in the map life. What happened before, what happened behind, but also what's going to happen after. Like, how is it going to be instrumentalized by a different group? And I can see that there is definitely like some political interest in using this platform for pushing some agenda, which makes total sense. It would be naive to think that this is going to be completely non-political. But I'm very interested and curious to see how this is going to evolve. Here, are we going to see some groups that are going to take over just to push some agenda? Who is going to portray it in which context for which purpose? So this is something I'm definitely interested in.
Thank you, Sebastian. And I'm sorry if I missed any questions, because I don't actually see everyone. So I think someone said there was a hand waving, but I just can't see it. So if you can unmute yourself and ask your question, now's the time. Otherwise, in this last minute, I would like to thank the panelists and who are also moderators. Thank you for your engagement. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your talent. And thanks for your involvement in this project. It can only happen because of you and because of the various participants who will submit their stories. Thanks.
Thanks, Patrick. I'll just say a few words of closing on behalf of ForSpace, thanking all of you for your participation. Obviously, a very special thank you to our panel of international moderators. Thank you for attending, all of the attendees, and supporting this new project. You already have the link of how to participate in the chat. We'll share it in an email as you leave if you wish as well. A recording of this full event will be available at CU Fourth Space on Facebook and on our website, which is concordia.ca/4. It'll be there very shortly. We invite you to also follow us on social media and check out our website to learn more about upcoming virtual activities and programming. But finally, final thing before you go, it will only take 1 minute or less to hear from you in the form of feedback, but this 1 minute of your time will be so valuable for today's speakers and organizers. So please answer the survey that I'm about to paste in the chat, and it will also appear as you leave the webinar. On that note, I'd like to thank you all and have fun outside in this heat today. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks to the Fourth Space.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.